Hey guys, it's me StrayF, you're watching SkateCode. And it's still August 24, 2026. I am finally able to do my first devlog. It's been a while that I wanted to do a devlog, but I had no time and I also had nothing to talk about, so today I'm going to talk about few things. So you're looking at my TUIWEATHERGIRL weather and disaster application. I want to talk about the development process and specifically the perils of over-engineering, the difficulties of a sole developer and how to overcome them. So also I'm going to walk you over what's new in WeatherGirl. So I actually don't know what was the last version which I released and talked about, and I can see it's been 1.07. 1.07 and we are in 1.2.15, so lots of new things. So let's go to the project page and walk you over quickly on what's new. And then I'm going to discuss everything that I wanted to tell you. Oh my. So we've been right here. Yes, okay. So first thing that I decided to do is let's intercept Ctrl+C, and when you close the terminal with the X button with the mouse or just the keyboard combination, when you close the terminal, this was not intercepted. So right now Ctrl+C and closing the terminal are being intercepted, which is not anything big, but still I did lots of bug fixing. Yes, very important. My makefile was initially made only for Debian and the Debian derivatives. So right now the makefile supports all major Linux distributions. I increased the maximum cities of interest by 1, so now there are 10 versus the 9 previously, because I noticed that there is still space for one more, so I decided to add it anyway. Yeah. So previously only small Q was able to close the application. Also, when there are long city names and long province names and long country names, this used to go over this area, which is now fixed, because I decided that I can I cannot properly abbreviate, but decided to shorten just some city names a little bit. So for example, Seine-Marie-la-Jaille, Pays de la Loire, France. Okay, this is now being shortened. It's not properly shortened, but at least it still is human understandable what it is about. Yeah, important. Previously the temperature assessment was only for Celsius, now it works for Fahrenheit as well. And we are getting to the list of very important updates. So the application can now auto-update unless you turn this off, in which case you can still update the application manually. So it took me a little bit to research that auto-update is fully possible in Python. Then I discovered Windows 10 bugs. This is something I discovered today when I was making videos. So I need to fix this, that's fine. Okay, and yeah. So important things are that now I can add any point on the planet Earth as a city of interest, or I can set it as my location, because let's say I have decided to live in the middle of the desert or in the middle of the ocean and I want to monitor my weather around my area, so now this is fully possible. This right here in Sion is not an actual city. This is actually power station. So this was the new important feature, the other new important feature I introduced. So this is a list of 46 currently all power stations which are outside geographical boundaries of any country, because there are power stations which are still within the geographical boundaries on the territory of a country, so these are not considered. What you're looking at are just stations which are on the Antarctic. They are not on any country. Antarctic is considered neutral territory. So the country here tells me that, for example, station Vostok is operated by Russia, but it's not in Russia, it's operated by Russia. Concordia Station is operated by France and Italy combined. Scott Station is operated by New Zealand. And yeah, you can add any power station as a city of interest. Even you can set it as your own location, which is fine. So I introduced glyphs. Initially I wanted to be as simple as possible, but then I decided, okay, why not create a little beauty by introducing glyphs? Well, this also introduced a certain amount of difficulties and changes that I had to do, and I did it. So right now there are glyphs for the sky situation, right here. There are glyphs for the zodiac and the moon phases. There are glyphs for is it day or night, and here. That's fine. And again, the auto update feature, I was really happy when I succeeded to do this. So right now I don't need to install the application by downloading from the GitHub page. Normally, so for example, this is my developer directory. Normally I would make install to install it, but right now I don't need to do it because I can just say update app, and this will try to update the app. But there is no newer version, that's why nothing happened. Normally, when application update happens, you will see that the application will start with one version and very transparently will change to another version, which actually you will not see on the screen, but you will see in the log file. Yeah, so I introduced this too. I don't want to choke GitHub, so this is why I introduced 3-minute update limit. So don't try to run the update too often. You can still run the application meanwhile, but do not run the update too often. Alright, so these are the new features, and I'm really happy with what I finally got. Now let's talk about the other things. Let's talk about the application in general. So as I said, this application was specifically created for my dual Linux project, which is Debian based, command line only, terminal only, Remix, no desktop environment involved. And I love this project. I made it as an experiment and I wanted to have weather application for this project. And to be honest, there are other weather applications that you can use on the terminal. Forgot what was the name. Anyway, you could use CURL to get directly in the terminal the weather for the current area, but it was very brief information. It was very fast because it's very brief information. It's not like my application which downloads tons of information, because these are actually about 13 different APIs being queried in one session every 30 minutes to get to you tons of information, which is also being real-time and evaluated on the spot to give you proper warnings, proper color coding, and so on and so on. Basically, now as I think how much work I've done, I want to bang my head in the wall, but still the result is finally here, finally done, working. I have only one bug which I discovered today to fix, and yeah, important, very important, I changed it actually how this application works on Windows 10. I never considered Windows 11 because I have no machine with Windows 11 to test it on, but I have two machines with Windows 10, so I tested it on both. And I can tell you this, before the way it was working on Windows 10 was that the Python code would actually try to force the the terminal window to maximize and then run. And that was wrong. Not theoretically wrong, but practically wrong, because I discovered that curses is not properly doing it like it's doing it, but this introduces problems with Windows, problems with the Windows terminal. And I was getting into bugs. I can actually show you. I was getting result like this. After terminal minimize and then restore, the application was looking glitchy. Not to mention that the glyphs are not properly displayed. So this took me a little while to discover how to fix. But now, in order to avoid this, what the application is doing is that it will not force to resize the terminal. Instead, I created native Windows 10 shortcut which would maximize the terminal after opening new terminal and then launch the code. So the code will be launched in already maximized terminal. This is if you use the Windows 10 shortcut. Then if you don't want to, you just can resize the terminal yourself and launch the application. Finally, these are all the new features. I'm happy with the result. Let's go a little bit technical to the details. So why the application works the way it works? So first of all, this application was written with few things in mind. I wanted an application which would be cross-platform. I wanted an application which will work equally well in modern terminal, but also in bare-bone terminals. That was the problem. I also wanted the application to be maximum portable, for which I chose only the bare minimum. And this is why I chose curses. Like, yeah, I know the best TUI Python, at least, framework is Rich. I wanted to go with Rich. And probably I would have avoided a lot of pitfalls, lots of headaches. However, I wanted maximum portability and I was curious about curses, so I chose curses. And this introduced lots of headaches. So curses is very bare bone, very minimalistic. If you want to do quick development, curses is very good. But if you want to do a little bit more, something more sophisticated, you will bang your head in the wall. So what happened? Basically, curses will give you the opportunity to draw everything yourself. But this is not what I wanted. And actually, I can show it to you. I wanted to have multiple views. And in the very beginning everything was fine because I was creating each view, but when I got to the point when I wanted to create something more sophisticated like this view, I discovered that creation of one view takes me one full week, and that was lots of time. So I wanted to speed up the process, and usually speeding up involves very much losing time in something else, which will later speed it up. And this is when you actually go to the point of over engineering. So what happens is that in order to display this, in order to be able to create this quickly, I had to develop a separate framework wrapping around ncurses, which is the Python curses, which will provide some automation for me. Something that I will release separately very soon, but I lost a lot of time to develop. However, it was worth it, because right now developing of one view similar to this will take me from 1 to 2 hours maximum. I can actually show you how it works. So this is the code of the application, and specifically this view is called dashboard view. So I define all the windows here, then I get all the information, and finally I displayed everything. So let's say what will happen if I want to remove one of the windows. Let's say I don't want to have warnings. So alright, let's find all the code about the warnings window. So normally, without my framework, what you will have to do, if you need to remove something from the middle or introduce something in the middle, you will have to recalculate the coordinates of everything which is below, and so on and so on. In my case, I can only comment out things. Actually, let's comment out the entire thing. Alright, this should solve the problem. Sorry, let's launch the developer version, which is right here. Bang! It's gone. It's gone, and everything which was below it just was shifted upwards automatically. Now let's reintroduce everything back. And it's right here, because my framework, what it does is it does a lot of calculations and automation on where everything should go. So now you understand why I lost the time I lost to get to the point that I'm here right now. And this caused me sometimes to feel really bad, and I wanted to quit developing. I wanted to just do other things. Even I didn't want to look at computer at all at some point. So I had downtime for these 4 months. I had a downtime of about maybe 2-3 weeks, where I didn't want to look at my code at all. But in the end I decided, okay, let's actually push through and find a solution and fix it and release it, and you are looking at the result right now. So this is why my framework was created, and I will soon release it separately. What my framework does is it only automates curses, and it makes things very easy for you. It doesn't yet take full advantage of the full functionality of curses. Currently, the design principle of my framework is to work in a layout of columns in a 2D environment, which means that I don't take into consideration windows which will pop up on top of these windows. I take into consideration only windows which will be next to each other in some way. But again, you just notice that how quickly it is actually to do changes to the layout, and it's basically minutes, seconds even. When you want to remove something, you don't need to take care of everything which is after it. And this is actually something that I was struggling with. So over-engineering, this is something that I often do, and sometimes I feel bad about it, but in the end it's a good thing. I'm talking about perils of over-engineering because normally this application was ready for 1 week in the very first version with a very basic view, which was displaying basically only this information right here. When I decided to go, okay, let's develop this also, because I wanted warnings about some things, but then I wanted warnings about other things, and then I wanted warnings about more things, and then I wanted, okay, let's show also information about cities, but I want to add cities and remove cities and do list management, and then let's add more things on the screen because there is space, but then let's actually beautify some of the things. And you get to a point where also actually you want to kill yourself, just because you realize that you started very simple, but you over-engineered something. But you always go with the idea because you want to create something cool or something useful, or very important, because you have the need to create precisely this functionality that you wanted to create. And in the end you get to some difficulty which really is stopping you, and you want to stop, but all you need to do is to find the strength to push through, because developing this really is about discipline, about finding the strength to push through. So discipline is the most important requirement for a sole developer and for any developer in that part. Now, speaking of artificial intelligence, I had no choice but to use artificial intelligence, but only as assistant. So what you see right here, the majority of it was created the old school. So I designed everything, I coded it myself. However, there were details about which I needed help. So my VS Code doesn't have set any coding agent. The way I used the artificial intelligence, for example, was give me list of the power stations with these details, give me list of this, give me list of that. Also, there was no way for me to know how to interpret the data coming from some of the APIs. For example, humidity warning. Okay, I know that humidity of 33% is not very comfortable, but how it would impact people with respiratory conditions, I had no way to know. So I was asking the AI, give me how to interpret, help me to interpret this data, and how to display the warnings. I needed specific values for which to display specific warnings. So this is how I was using the AI. Very rarely I was asking AI to give me code. Usually I want to create the code myself because I'm old school developer and I want to control what's going on in the code actually. Still, yeah, the majority of time, as you can see, I was using Gemini. I'm using SkateCode in rare situation. The majority of time also I was using AI, either Gemini or SkateCode, as a QA, because I was testing a lot my application, but time to time I needed code analysis and quality assurance from neutral place. So I would upload my entire code to Gemini or SkateCode and I would ask to test it and to tell me what's wrong. Also, some optimizations were done from recommendation by AI. But again, we're talking about assistance here and there, small portions of code, not anything general. So basically that's it. But again, I'm against vibe coding. I wanted to code everything myself. There was one guy on Reddit which advised if you vibe coded it, you would have shortened the time to 2 months. Yes, probably. But this is not what I want to do. I want to code it myself. So, while this code is not perfect, the majority of it, like we talk about 85%, was coded by me. And I had to overcome this feeling that I always want to separate things in different files, but here I was aiming for high portability, so I was putting everything in a single file, which at the moment is 7,200 lines of code, and not just code, because as you can see in the very beginning there are arrays and lists and other structures of data about different things which are held here. So I save querying another API, which I don't want to do anymore. So yeah, and the majority of code is OOP. It's not anything which is state of the art, like design patterns and so on, but again, I started small. I wanted to be quick. Then I decided, okay, let's do proper formatting, let's use linters, let's use everything. But after I lost so much time in problems which I encountered with curses, I decided, oh damn, let's just finish the whole thing, and I wanted to release it already. So right now, while the code is still being formatted with black and iSort, it's not very much MyPy and Flake8 compliant. This is something that I'm aiming for when I release my framework, but again, here the code is sometimes a little bit spaghetti and macaroni. Still, as you can see, it's working, which is what I wanted to do, and it looks great, which is another thing which I wanted to do. So yeah, basically that's it. So to wrap this up, try not to get too much into over engineering. I do it, and it's one of my flaws, because I do it with the idea to spend a little bit more of time and efforts today to save time and efforts tomorrow. And in my case, if I decide to develop more views for this application, which I would probably do, it will save me lots of time and efforts. You saw how fast is this. If I want to add new window, it's just few lines of code and it will show up, and it will show nicely. If I want to remove a window, just comment few lines of code and it will show up nicely. Basically that's it. So this was really what I was aiming for. And that's it. Now, what else? Basically my process. My process is that I'm using VS Code, but this is not the only editor that I'm using. Actually, I'm using a combination of VS Code and Genie. And reason being, because the way Genie searches in documents is way more convenient than VS Code does. So for example, probably there is plugin for VS Code for that, but I don't know. Genie does it for me and it's very fast. So let's say I want to see list of all classes. Yeah, I have it here, but still. So I have list of all classes here, so I can click here and it will very quickly position me where the class is. I can put bookmark right here and another one, let's say right here, and I can jump between the two bookmarks very quickly. Yeah, it's very convenient for certain situations. This is something that VS Code is not that convenient, at least not to me. By the way, yeah, this is actually not VS Code, this is VS Codium, which is basically the more free version, the more open source version of VS Codium with VS Code without the Microsoft stuff in it. So the way I was working is when I was creating something, I'm using the terminal to check stuff. Yeah, I have the plugin here, but I don't use it. I like when I'm command line, I am much more in control. So for example, this is, yeah, sorry. This is how I am formatting my application, because I realized that the way it works on list, on Linux, on list, at least on VS Codium, it's creating problems sometimes because it's a little bit slow. So this is why I do it out of the VS Codium, and then VS Codium is picking up the changes. And I do all the git commands manually because I just find it faster and I'm way more in control of the whole process when I do it like this. Basically that's it. What else I can talk you about? You should be aware of different things if you are a solo developer. So sometimes picking one framework just because you think it's simpler can lead to a situation where you end up doing more stuff, because sometimes less is more, but sometimes less is way more. So by choosing something which is less, you end up doing more things. So sometimes maybe it's good to pick up something which is a little bit more complicated in order to save you headaches later in the process. And yeah, speaking of programming languages, I picked up Python because currently this is what I code in and I find it very pleasurable. In the past I've been using Peril for many years, but this is not something that I would choose to create a modern application. Yeah, I know there are Perl lovers out there, please don't talk me out. I used Perl for 12 years, so I had decent exposure to it. Python, It's really pleasurable to work with, at least to me. Python have been really developed through the years. I first touched Python professionally when it was Python 2. Now it's Python 3 and it's very advanced. There are so many things about Python that I love compared to Perl and PHP. PHP also evolved, yeah, that's true, but Python was created from the ground up with so good concepts in mind, which I love, for which PHP and Perl were patched. So just Python natively carries out some things very, very, very nicely. And yeah, so basically that's it. This has been my project TUIWEATHERGIRL. Again, be careful with over-engineering. Be careful because sometimes it will lead to big headaches. Sometimes you will not be able to do it, like you would have to drop it when you are in the middle of the process and it's really painful. But if done right and if you do it personally for you, so you are not bound by time, at least not much, it could lead to great results. You must have really good self-discipline, for which, by the way, I'm using Jira. Yeah, I am a bad Jira user because I'm not right now putting issues often, but I've been using Jira through the process to help me out with organization. Basically, the way I organize myself is mostly into text files. I tried Obsidian. I don't really like it. Markup is a great thing, but somehow I don't like Obsidian. I want something more simpler. Obsidian is putting too much complexity in the whole situation. This is why I use text files. Sometimes I was typing notes on my phone. Sometimes I was typing in Jira, but overall text files are my thing for many years. And yeah, basically that's it. This is my development process. This is how I created it. I'm giving you again a warning about over-engineering. People know, sometimes people dislike me for over-engineering things because I'm becoming slow. I'm losing time engineering things which at first are not needed, but I foresee that they will save great amount of effort and time in the future, and usually I'm right about it. Not everything understands it, but I'm right about it. Basically that's it. Thanks for watching. This is my first devlog I ever release. Maybe it's a little bit longer than I wanted to make it, but again, it's just random thoughts that I am exposing here and there. So you can tell me in the comments of this video what's your process, how you're doing things, and what are your thoughts on over-engineering and how you are overcoming the problems with it. Thanks for watching. If you want to try my TUIWEATHERGIRL application, please feel free to do so and let me know what you think of it. I'm StrayF. You've been watching SkateCode. Goodbye.